entertainment submission. Thank you. We are now at discussions. The first of the two discussions is Phoenix Center discussion. Councilman James, you requested to add this. I think you gave us the gist, but do you want to cue it up further in terms of the update you're interested in hearing?
Yes, I am going to let the mayor clarify some things because I think a lot of residents are still very concerned about it. The comments that were made when we talked about this last was that this is a deal that the Oakland County is doing, and it has what they're doing has nothing to do with the city. But I have concerns about two things. First of all, the fact that the city does have this agreement with the parking, the people who are supposed to be managing the parking, and we still own the parking lot. We still own, as far as I know, the entertainment area where the roof blew off. And so those areas, the assumption of Oakland County's proposal to purchase those two buildings and to build a campus there, that assumption is clearly from the picture that was printed in Cranes. It assumes that they are going to tear that parking lot down and that they're going to tear down the entertainment center. So to me, there are a lot of questions that, as a citizen, I'm asking, that there are a lot of assumptions there that we are involved in that, to me, we're being silent about. And I don't think this is the time to be silent. I think this is the time to let people understand what is going on with respect to that purchase. And it's specifically how we as a city tie into that purchase in terms of the parking garage, the contract, the 99-year contract that the previous administration had with that supplier, and also with what we are going to do with the entertainment center. And then also the email that you sent out, Deputy Mayor, about the cost of the repairs there. I remembered hearing that we had insurance to cover that. I was kind of surprised. I wasn't surprised at the amount that it cost, but I was surprised that we did not have insurance that covered that cost. So there are just a lot of things with respect to the Phoenix Center that I think we need to have some conversation around.
Mayor Brown.
Yeah, so I know we talked in depth about this a month or so ago, but I'll try to summarize some of the key elements. So first of all, this is a very important topic for the community to be aware of. It has potentially a lot of impacts for the community. When we've also talked about the fact that city government is not a party to Oakland County's purchase agreement, I want to be clear about what that means and what that doesn't mean. There is a purchase agreement that Oakland County has entered into with the owners of the two office towers. The owner of those two office towers is a private entity. It is not the city of Pontiac. And so that is a purchase agreement between Oakland County and the private owner of those two office towers. Those office towers have, for decades, been owned by private entities, not by the city of Pontiac. As part of that agreement between the County of Oakland and the private owner, the county would also step into the shoes and assume the lease that that private owner has of the city-owned Phoenix Center. And so if Oakland County closes on that purchase agreement and obtains title to those two privately owned office towers, the county would also become the new lessee of the parking garage from the city, which owns the parking garage. Anybody could do that. So any private entity, any third party can become the assignee, the assignee of the lease that the current private owner has of the city-owned parking garage. We don't have a ability to veto that. So that's simply between the private owner of the 2 office towers that also has this lease of the city-owned parking garage, and they can assign or sell, in essence, that lease, their lease rights to the Phoenix Center, this 99-year lease that the previous administration entered into, to any third party, private or otherwise. And that's what would happen if Oakland County closes on this purchase agreement. So they would own, if Oakland County chooses to close, they would own the 2 privately owned office towers that are currently privately owned, and they would become the new lessee that would have this 99-year lease on the city-owned parking garage. So we don't have any ability to affect that. However, there's been quite a bit of speculation about what happens if the county does close, and what does that mean in terms of the parking garage. What it would mean is that they would then assume, the county would assume, all of the responsibilities and rights that the current private lessee has on the parking garage. So the county would then be responsible for making improvements to the parking garage, and they would also have a 99-year lease to the parking. If the county wanted to demolish that parking garage or build a new parking garage, anything that changes that parking garage in terms of selling it, if the city was to convey that land to the county, that would have to be approved by city council. If the county wanted to demolish that parking garage, that would have to be approved by city council. So the city has not made any decisions about any permanent change to that parking garage in terms of demolishing it or selling it or anything along those lines. That, if the county wants to do those things, that's something that we, the city, would have to make a decision about. So I want to be clear about that. The city owns the parking garage, and there's nothing about the county's purchase agreement that changes that. The county is currently in their due diligence period under their purchase agreement, and is looking at the condition of all of the buildings and properties. The county is also seeking to obtain state funding to help acquire and renovate those buildings. That funding, in theory, could be used not just to renovate the office towers, but it could be used to renovate the parking garage or to demolish the parking garage and build a new parking garage. But if that is the course that the county wants to take in terms of demolishing the parking garage, we would have to approve that as the city. And so that is a decision that we as the city have not yet taken. So I want to be clear about that. But I think what will likely inform some of the decisions that the county wants to pursue will be what financial assistance the state is willing to provide. And we won't know the answer to that until the state finalizes the state's budget, which is hard to predict exactly when that will happen. A lot of people in Lansing are still saying that might occur before July 4th, but that's not for certain. It could take beyond July 4th. So that's currently the lay of the land. I do just want to take a moment, too, and reflect on the narrative that the previous mayor has proffered, that somehow the deal that she negotiated is sacrosanct. The deal that was negotiated by the previous administration was not a good deal for the city. It gave control of the parking to a private entity for 99 years, although the previous mayor says that paying $19 million for the office towers is a bad idea for the county. That's exactly what her administration did, is pay actually over $19 million for the office towers and then sold them at a huge loss to another private investor. And as part of that, the city is still paying off a $6 million debt that the previous administration left the city with. And one of the things that I've advocated for at the state level is if the state provides financial assistance for the Phoenix Center deal, we should receive assistance and funding from the state to pay off that debt. Whether that will happen or not, I don't know, but that's what I've been advocating for with legislators. That deal that the previous mayor entered into also saddled the city with the Purdue school site, which is a horrible liability, which will cost hundreds of thousands, if not more, to demolish. And so the previous administration's deal around the Phoenix Center was a bad deal for the city. It was a bad deal for the city's taxpayers. And if the county's proposal can help address those problems that we collectively as Pontiac residents and taxpayers were left with, it could be a big improvement for our residents. But it would have to be done the right way. And that's why the safeguard of city council and the mayor, of us, having to approve any demolition of the Phoenix Center, any conveyance of any city-owned property is so important, because we collectively, I know, are not going to sign off on anything in that regard that would be bad for the city. But it gives us a seat at the table. If the county chooses to move forward and close on this property, it gives us a seat at the table to weigh in on the direction that the county goes, and I think that's very important.
Mayor Greimel, or Deputy Mayor Stevens, Councilman James also invoked the cost of the removal and remediation of the storm damage to the canopy from the amphitheater site. You provided us, per public inquiry and council follow-up, you provided us an excellent breakdown of what the cost was and who performed that work. The question we still have is, so what funding source, or how is that bill covered? And if you could just help close the loop on that element of it would be helpful. Deputy Mayor Stevens.
Yeah, okay. So those were paid out of city general fund dollars. You are correct that we do have insurance. The insurance has not been claimed because the city had not yet determined if we were going to demolish the structure or rebuild the structure. So we are just waiting on that. The structure being the tensile roof. So there's still the support beams that are up there. Until we made that final decision, we did not want to take the payout, because depending on what we did, we might end up getting something different.
Mayor Greimel?
Yeah, just to amplify that point, all of that is true about the damage to the canopy from the windstorm in December of 2021, before all of us took office. But there's another element to this that's important to keep in mind, which is, although the amphitheater on top of the Phoenix Center is not subject to the 99-year lease, it will cost, even aside from the damage to the canopy, even before that occurred, all estimates were that it will cost millions of dollars to bring that amphitheater and the associated elements of the parking garage that are required to facilitate productive use of that amphitheater up to snuff. And in particular, all of the electrical had been stripped in the amphitheater. The elevator didn't work. And so there are a lot of huge investments that have to be made in order to bring that amphitheater up to working condition. Bands can't use that amphitheater, or other musical artists can't use that amphitheater if they can't get their equipment up there with use of the freight elevator, which has not been working. Obviously, any amplifiers, any other sound equipment needs electricity. So there are lots of improvements that would have to be made there. And the estimates that were prepared by AUK Construction at the time, and I sat down with AUK to go through those within the past couple of months, is that it will cost millions of dollars, presumably on the part of the city, since it's the city's responsibility, to bring that amphitheater up to productive use, which again was another legacy that the city was left with as a result of the previous administration's Phoenix Center deal.
And what's the time window with the insurance claim?
That's a great question. We are well within our window because we made the claim. Now they're just waiting for us to determine, are we going to rebuild or are we going to tear down?
I have to imagine there's some time window, so if you want to let us know, analyze what that looks like. Councilman Rutherford.
Since I live in that district, it's my district. Number one question is this. You've answered the question that we control the vote if the county gets the possession of the building. We actually have the ultimate decision to make if it's going to be torn down. Correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so this is my only question. Going forward, is there a way for us to get the message out more clearer so that this won't keep occurring? Because if we don't minimize the rumor mill and minimize misinformation, it's going to start a battle in this community. And most people won't say this type of stuff because it isn't, appropriate. I'm going to say it because it's going to affect me the most because it's in my district. We have to do a better job from the administration side to be more transparent. I ain't saying y'all not transparent, but I'm saying make it so clear that a blind man can see that we don't have any backhand deals, because that's where a lot of this is coming from. And we can't stop the rumors, but we can minimize the misinformation. So my question is very simple. When, and God bless if it goes through, what are the steps that are in place to make sure that we're getting the right information so that our constituents, specifically mine, have the adequate information? I yield to the mayor.
You have the floor.
So unfortunately, there are some individuals, this is not a majority in the community, but there are some individuals who are intentionally spreading misinformation, as you know. We have been very consistent and transparent about the truth here, but it's difficult to get that message out. We've repeatedly disclosed accurate information here at city council meetings. I have had this same discussion at community meetings, including some community meetings in your district. And so we'll continue to be forthright about getting the truth out. I think it's a lot easier right now because there's uncertainty about whether the county is even going to close. There's uncertainty about how much funding the state might provide. Right now, all we're able to do is talk about possibilities. And so that makes it challenging because we are talking about, well, this might happen or this might happen, and there's a lot of uncertainty. I think once we know how much funding the state is providing, once we know whether the county is closing, that will allow us to be more clear about exactly what is happening as opposed to what the possibilities are. So I think in the next month and a half, as we know these other factors and whether the county's closing, how much funding the state's providing, it will make it much easier for us to be very clear about what is happening as opposed to what might happen. And that will make it much easier for us to be very clear with the community about where this is heading.
Councilman James.
Yeah, I think I'm a lot more interested in what we are doing as opposed to the county in terms of our own properties. First of all, we inherited this settlement agreement. And from what I've seen, the city has really been the only entity that has actively been carrying out or complying with this settlement agreement. I don't understand why, as a city, we're not addressing that. Why we're not addressing the leasee with the parking, the parking leasee and the other parts of this settlement agreement. Why aren't we administering this settlement agreement? Because nobody seems to be keeping it except us. We are making the payments on the $6 million. And I don't understand that.
Would you like to yield to the mayor?
Yes, I yield.
You have the floor.
Yeah, I take your question to be a question as to not why we're making the payments on the $6 million, which we're contractually obligated to do based on the previous administration's agreement. But I take your question to be, why isn't the lessee making improvements to the parking garage or a sufficient amount of improvements to the parking garage?
Yes.
The lessee has made some improvements to the parking garage. but they certainly have not made the level and amount of improvements that I think many have reasonably expected them to make. I think part of the challenge is that the agreement entered into by the previous administration, which is to say that they stuck the city with, is a very poorly written agreement. It is not clear what specific improvements need to be made. And as a result, and it's also not at all clear about what the city's recourse and remedies are if those improvements are not made. And so it's put the city, I think, in a very challenging position, because if we seek to enforce the provisions of the agreement, it's unclear what those provisions are and what the city's remedies are, which means, translation to the general public, is that if we seek to enforce those provisions, it's likely to lead to years of litigation in terms of going to court and trying to get them to do what people think they're supposed to do. And this follows, of course, what was already, 8 years of litigation, something like that. And going down a road of further litigation with years more of lawsuits is not a very appetizing path forward, which is another reason why the county's acquisition of the privately owned towers and their stepping into the shoes of the lessee might be beneficial, because it might provide clarity as to what exactly the path forward looks like, instead of this murky, horribly written agreement that the previous administration stuck the city with. And it's put us in a very difficult position in terms of our ability to enforce anything when it was so terribly written.
Councilman James?
I just want to make a final comment on this and why I brought this up. If this agreement, if the county are able to close on the agreement to buy the 2 towers, and, they will become a dominant player in the city of Pontiac's downtown development. They will become a dominant player. And so I think it's a big deal for us, and it kind of is concerning to me that we are not allowing the city to kind of have this conversation. We seem to be creating the master plan on the fly here. Because this is a big deal. This will dominate, if it goes through, it will dominate community development for downtown. And you would think that we would all be in that conversation, administration, council, and community, downtown business leaders, that there would be more people involved in this conversation than what we have than what we currently have. That's my big concern, because it's a big deal. It's going to, if it goes through, it pretty much will be downtown development for the city of Pontiac for the next couple of decades.
Councilwoman Rutherford.
So I just want to just say a couple of statements, because again, that's District 1, and oftentimes I'm down there talking to developers, people who are developers, people who own property there, and not just that, people who are living downtown. This is a catalyst to change the city as we know it. And we have to look at it from that aspect as well. The big issue is everybody's scared of gentrification. Gentrification is already in Pontiac, so that shouldn't be the issue. The issue is, how can we best serve our citizens and best benefit for everybody involved? What we have in this county, and I can say this because I met with Dave Coulter. I asked him the tough questions because I had major concerns, is that he is doing this, the county is doing this because the city of Pontiac has been underserved for over 60 years. Do you not remember what L. Brooks Patterson did to the city? Do you not understand that we have never had a real person who was in that seat advocating for minorities or people from the LGBTQ community or others? So this is a catalyst to change everything, not just downtown, but the city of Pontiac in itself. And so what we have to keep doing is sometimes we have to wait until we get all of the information before we disseminate it to others. I had to learn that because my emotions sometimes get the best of me, and I want to be like, I want it now, 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 now. And sometimes that will hinder developers. It will hinder people that want to actually come here and do work because they feel hesitant, because they don't want to feel already attacked. I think we need to let the county do what the county doing, and when they come before us, then we deal with it. And that's all I wanted to say.
Mayor Greimel.
Well, I think that's well said, Councilwoman Rutherford. And just to reflect on Councilwoman James's comments, it is a big deal. It's a very big deal. And as you say, it's a big deal if the county closes on it. And that's, I think, one of the key uncertainties. And so there's not a lot to discuss until we know whether the county will close on it and how much funding the state may provide for this. Until we know those two things, there's not a lot to build meaningful community conversation around. And so we're waiting on those two important questions to be answered, and they will be answered in the next 6 weeks before we can have meaningful community conversation. But yes, if this moves forward, the county will be a major player in downtown development. And who is the county? The county ultimately is all of us. It's a public entity. Represented now by a Democratic county executive and a Democratic majority on the county commission. Currently, the players in downtown development are all private sector players. This will mean that there'll be an additional public sector player in the loop, and I think that creates actually a lot of positive opportunities for positive development, but it's got to be done right. It's got to be done in a deliberative way with the community at the table. But it's premature to have that conversation until we know, A, how much funding is the state providing, and B, is the county closing? And once we know those two things, as I've said earlier, we'll be able to have a robust, meaningful community conversation about how to do this the right way in a way that benefits the community.
Further discussion? That concludes that discussion item. The second discussion item is Phoenix Place Apartments. Councilman Rutherford.
I have to bring this to the forefront for this administration because there